Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, and we will cover verses 215 to 218, 4 verses. Initial phase of the system of Deen. And these are the references, and I've taken some excerpts from the meanings of the Quran, volume 3, and this is our contact. Recap of verses 211 to 214, which we covered on 19th of July. When nations make the choice to go against the laws of Allah, then they face the consequences of following the wrong path of life. And we can witness this in year of 2026 in which we are living, that whatever is happening now, it is the consequence of for the last 200 to 300 years. Here the Quran has quoted the example of Bani Israel to warn the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen not to abandon the Sirat-e-Mustaqim. So Quran says that don't get distracted by these things. If you know the laws of Allah and you are holding on to the rope of Allah extended to us through His book, the Quran, then you develop that kind of a personality where you stay on this path and not to worry about it. But that does not mean that we should not be aware of what is going on around our world. Because knowing the Taghuti system is part of this deal on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. The main reason for going astray is due to becoming allured by material attractions and starting to think that life ends with death, thereby manifesting Kufr against the guidance of the Quran. And Kufr is not only to display outwardly, but in our thought process as well. If we start losing conviction in the Quran, for example, after initially accepting its Eimaan and then giving it up on the way, then we turn our Eimaan into Kufr. One sign of this Kufr is to scoff at those who, after they become mu'mineen, then invite fellow human beings towards the book of Allah. This path of Kufr ultimately leads to self-destruction according to the law of requital. Part of this process of becoming mu'min is not to be frustrated as well, and also not to think of giving up, and not to indulge in any frustrated talk or negative thought or hopelessness. We should be able to overcome any feelings of hopelessness and despair which are arising in our mind after accepting Iman, and we should strengthen ourselves. That is why it is important to actively participate in our question and answer session, because that is where we gain strength. Then the Quran invites us to reflect on another important aspect of life, i.e. to remove differences by coming to the Quran and to promote unity among mankind so that a life free from fear and grief can be created in the world. So this life of fear and grief, we have to think through it, analyze it psychologically, and look at the world and look at the agencies which are creating this fear and grief in the world. It mentions the arriving of Anbiya together with books of Wahi to guide mankind. For this, it quotes the model of Mu'mineen who, after acknowledging the existence of Allah and the life of the hereafter, remove their differences, and this economizes their efforts towards their aim of treading on the Sirat-e-Mustaqim. This path includes the life of the hereafter. And it's a beautiful path, because as we tread on this path, keep strengthening our Iman by staying together and discussing the system of Deen, it creates that kind of psyche within us which gets the assurance of the hereafter. Because the mere fact of coming together and treading together on this path is a big sign that we should stop worrying about hereafter and work towards the system of Deen collectively. Next, the Quran guides us towards another aspect of confronting hardships and challenges on this path due to opposition from those who assume their life will end with death and who do not wish for unity to be created among mankind. Another important point over here, which I'll re-emphasize, is that when we do not come to the Quran, it is a fact of life that we are living life as if it will end with death. It makes no difference what kind of religious beliefs we have, and we have some kind of a blind faith in the mercy and love of God and those kind of a big talk. It makes no difference. If we use the Quranic criteria, the things are absolutely in black and white. They do not desire to have a life in the hereafter, i.e., they deny the possibility of self-development under the guidance of the Quran. Allah tells the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen not to be affected by this, as the path of Al-Haq can never deceive and is bound to succeed if followed with patience and perseverance. Let's go to the next slide. Outline of today's presentation, that is verses 215 to 218. Having established the system of Deen before the system of Rububiyyat has fully acquired its final form, Mu'mineen wish to know what they should make available for the system out of their possessions and earnings. This aspect was introduced in verse 177, and part of it is repeated here by Allah. Since the system is in place and is facing opposition from those who have rejected it and wish to continue with the man-made system, the Quran next asks the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to stand up to defend this system and to resort to fighting if war is imposed on them by the opponents of the Quran. Continuing from verses 190 to 191, the Quran provides guidance regarding the sanctity of those months in which fighting is prohibited. However, if the opponents resort to creating fitna, that is mischief, tumult, and oppression, even during these months, then the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen is permitted to fight against them in order to restore peace in the land. Here the Quran also records the reason for creating this fitna, i.e. to force Mu'mineen to revert to Kufr. And this is another very important aspect which we will cover later on. Next, Allah makes it clear that if anyone reverts to Kufr after declaring to be a Mu'min, then he will forfeit any benefits accrued after accepting initial Iman. All deeds will go to waste. So it is very important that we should be very clear what Iman is, what are its connotations, and what are its benefits in this life of ours. Those who accept Iman, migrate if needed, and remain steadfast on this path and bear its hardships, they come within the sphere of the protection and rahmat of Allah. This last sentence, we'll go through it in some slides later on. But the issue before us is always that these things don't appear suddenly. We face it on this path gradually, because as the system strengthens itself, that is the system of Deen, we become very strong enough and determined enough to face all challenges on this path. Let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, making wealth and possessions available in the first phase of the system of Deen. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ قُلْ مَا أَنْفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ فَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبَيْنِ وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. We should compare this verse with verse 177 as well, because part of that verse 177 is referred over here. Continuing from verse 214, where challenges on the path of Allah are mentioned, for this the first phase is the sacrificing of possessions. E.Rasool, and we can put our name over here, that Quran is addressing each one of us. Your companions inquire from you that how much wealth and possessions will be needed for this, and where will these need to be expended. Say to them that this program will be initiated from limited spheres within society. At the present time, for this you should note that who are the individuals within these spheres who are in need of help from others. So identification of these needy people is the first stage within the system of Deen. For example, in your own homes, first of all, take care of your parents. Then extend outwards from this and seek out those who have been left friendless and helpless in society. In addition, those whose running business has come to a halt. Then extend this process beyond your neighborhood and look at those who are entering from outside, that how much of your help do they need. Its ultimate limit is that which is described in verse 219, which we'll be covering in our next presentation. So important aspect which we should keep in mind is that this verse is not only dealing with the physical needs of individuals, it is also asking us to look at their psyche as well, their self as well, that what are those needs as well, so that they come out of that fear of not getting their needs met and the uncertainty which the system creates. You should meet the needs of these people and have conviction in this, that whatever you will do for the good of others will all remain within the knowledge of Allah. Very powerful statement, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ alim. And this is where our firm conviction in the book of Allah and in Allah and the hereafter comes, that we raise the level of our conviction sky high, where we can see the reality of our existence very clearly. Not even an atom's worth will remain without producing its outcome. Next slide is further analysis. Under verse 177, we covered that in order to become a mu'min, we need to identify the problems which ensue from the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. And we can see that in the world of 2026, where few percent in the world control most of the wealth of the world. And that Allah has asked us to make wealth available for those who have been left yatim and miskeen by the system. This is the prerequisite to acquiring expansiveness in our consciousness called bir. If we do not acquire this bir, then essentially we will be living at a very basic level as human beings, which is very close to the animalistic level of life, which is a requirement for the establishment of the system of Deen. Following the establishment of the initial stages of Deen, here the Quran provides the answer to a question which Mu'mineen ask, i.e., what should they make available for the needs of others, that is, fellow human beings. Here we need to pause and reflect. There is an interval between the time that verse 177 presents guidance for the psychological development of Mu'mineen, and then those same Mu'mineen, maybe some out of them, after a while pose this question to the system, headed by the messenger and his companions who have become muttaqeen. So these mu'mineen are asking the messenger, that is the center of the system. So that means somebody has to lead. Some group of mu'mineen have to lead. So over here in 177, Allah had said that Eimaan is not just to face towards east or west, but bir is that you accept Eimaan and then, despite having love for the wealth, spend on so and so, so and so. So having made clear in 177, after a while, maybe a lapse of few years, then these mu'mineen are asking this question. The Quran provides the answer to extend help towards those who are in need, as noted in verse 215, and tells us that in the initial stages of this system, which is the transitory phase, to organize it at an individual level, but this will be organized and managed as part of the collective program of Deen by a central authority. So this could continue for a few years or maybe a short period of time, undefined, depending on the state of mental development of the society under Deen. But it has to come under the central authority's control and become decentralized as well for its execution. Let's go to the next slide, more reflections. We have mentioned previously that the Quran repeatedly emphasizes making wealth and possessions available for those who have been left destitute by all man-made systems. This includes both physical and psychological aspects. This means that we need to become conscious of these aspects as part of our education for bir. Allah wishes us to register this aspect of taking care of fellow human beings deeply within ourselves, so that it becomes a part of ourself, just as breathing is part of our physical existence. So Deen is not possible by those individuals who have come to the Quran as past-time students or as part-time students. We have to be committed to this path fully, completely, fully convinced. Obviously, this is not possible unless we acquire this ability by manifesting all those latent potentials within us, using the permanent values at both an individual and collective level. A couple of verses in this regard, for example, Quran says, Allazi yuti malahu yatazakka, that those who give their wealth to achieve development of their self. So over here, the meaning of zakat is made clear. It's the same root. In another place, Quran says, who are these mu'mineen? We can go through the verses before this. وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. I only quoted these two parts, and those in whose wealth is a right for those who ask and those who are deprived. Very important that once we come on this path, then we should always have some part of our possessions, even under man-made system, available for those who are needy. And this is to train ourselves, this is to educate ourselves, this is to feel the need for the system of Deen and to continue treading on this path and not to give up. The verse concludes beautifully by stating that وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Whatever you do in terms of khair, and khair is to provide expansiveness to your choices, because khair has the same root as of that ikhtiyar, or our choice, our authority, and our decision making. So that means once we follow the path of the Quran, our choices increase because we are fully aware of our trait of choice and intent. Remember that it is known to Allah. This means the system of Deen should recognize and appreciate these efforts by its members. Let's go to the next verse, 216, further command on fighting in the path of Allah. And Quran has said, Kutiba alaykumul qitalu wa huwa kurhul lakum wa sa an takrahu shay'an wa huwa khairul lakum wa sa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrul lakum wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. So what I've done is I've highlighted this part because this is important and I'll discuss it slightly in more detail later. After possessions, there will be the phase of laying down life, i.e., you will also need to fight against your opponents. This phase will be burdensome to you because you are accustomed to fighting with the goal of plunder and violence. So Quran over here is saying that you have been fighting previously as well. For example, there are wars going on in the world and there are soldiers who are fighting in virtually in every war, and civilians are also suffering. So the Quran is saying over here that war is not something new to you. You have been doing it previously as well, but now the outlook has changed, the goal has changed, the aim has changed, the purpose has changed. Fighting for the welfare of humanity in which there is only sacrifice and no self-interest is very difficult. But do not make a decision in these matters through your individual intellect and emotions. This is because it is entirely possible that your selfish intellect may display some matter as being highly undesirable. Yet it is a source of great good and blessing for you from the point of view of the well-being of yourself and of course for the selves of other human beings. In contrast to this, the superficial demands of the intellect and emotions may make something appear very pleasing, whereas it is highly detrimental in reality for the development of yourself. And this is important for us to understand that once we have Eimaan in the Quran and we have treaded a short distance on this path together with others, then we should be very assured that whatever might be the ups and downs of this path, it will always take us to that success which is promised in the Quran. That is why you should reach a decision in these matters in the light of Wahi, because the sight of Wahi observes the far-reaching reality, while the sight of your intellect, which is operating in obedience to your emotions, is very restricted, because human beings always look at their own interest. That is why a lot of time people say, watch your interest, and which is fine without the guidance of the Quran. But what they should do is watch the interest of every human being in the world under the guidance of the Quran. It cannot apprise the reality, but that does not mean that we should not be careful about the harms with non-Quranic minds can cause to our movement, to our efforts. Next slide, an important sign highlighted regarding fighting in the path of Allah. Commonplace translation of this verse is, fighting is prescribed upon you and you dislike it. But it is possible that you dislike a thing which is good for you and that you love a thing which is bad for you. But Allah knows and you know not. So this translation provides you some kind of a blind faith in whatever Quran is saying, whereas the meanings which we have given earlier are putting the rationale behind it. Because that is the way the flow of all the previous verses is. And we reach this point where Quran says fighting is prescribed for you because now the system has reached that place where you can fight back. Among us, there is a great deal of emphasis put on fasting as one of the pillars of Islam, but there is hardly any mention about fighting in the path of Allah. If we look at the wording of these verses, both start with this kind of command, Koteba alaykumus siyamu, and then it says, Koteba alaykumul qitalu. Both commands are in relation to the system of Deen and are addressed to the Jamaat-e-Momineen. This is a very important point which we should take away from today's presentation as well as the previous presentations, that all these verses are related to the system of Deen. It is noted here that it is possible some tasks may appear onerous, yet it is good for you, and that something may appear very attractive to you, while in reality it is a source of harm for you. Because Quran is asking us to not look at the short-term benefits of this life. Look at the farthest, the eternal benefits of this life, and link our efforts over here with the outcomes of the hereafter. And hereafter means of this life as well as of the life beyond death. In this connection, the verse Allah knows and you do not know embodies a fundamental reality, Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun, which means that what Allah knows, we need to know as well. Because it does not mean that we give up over there and say, okay, Allah knows it, I don't need to know it. No, what is meant over here is that since Allah knows it, so Mu'mineen, you must also know it. For the human self, which matters are a cause for good, and which are a cause for evil, can only be informed by the wahi of Allah. The intellect of self-interest cannot determine this decision. This is why intellectual vision is in need of the light of wahi. And that is why Quran has said that you should acquire bir using the Quranic guidance. Let us go to the next verse, 217, further guidance on fighting. यासलूनका अनिश शहरिल हराम क़ितालिन फ़ीहि कुल क़ितालुन फ़ीहि कबीरुन वसद्दुन अन सबीलिल्लाह व कुफ्रुन बिही वल मस्जिदिल हराम व इख़राजु अहलिही मिन्हु अकबरु इंदल्लाह वल फितनतु अकबरु मिनल क़त्ल वला यज़ालूना युक़ातिलूनकुम हत्ता यरुद्दूकुम अन दीनिकुम अनिस्तताउ वमन तदिद मिनकुम अन दीनिही फ़यमुत व हुवा काफ़िरुन फ़उलाइका हाबितत अमालुहुम फ़िद दुनिया वल आखिरत व उलाइका अस्हाबुन नार हुम फ़ीहा खालिदून. But whether it is peace or war, upholding the divine law is essential in every situation. For example, fighting in the month in which you have been prohibited from war is a very severe crime. On the other side, also bear in mind this fact that preventing people from coming to the path of Allah, rejecting and rebelling against the truth of His laws, not desisting from fighting even in the precincts of Masjid-e-Haram, and turning out from there those people who have taken refuge there, these are extremely serious crimes. This is mischief making, which Quran calls as fitna. And stirring up trouble is a cause for even greater destructive outcomes than killing, because ultimately these kind of fitnas, these take to wider killing, and we have seen it in today's world that how the wars start. These linger on for years and years, and then suddenly these explode into a big war. So the Quran is saying that prevention is better than cure. You make sure that all those things which lead to war should be prevented and removed in the first place. Also remember that these people who are pitted against you will never ever give up fighting until such a time that if they have the capacity for this, they can estrange you from your deen. This is their very purpose of war. So we should be aware of that. There will be a resistance, and there will be people who will like us to go back to position ante. That is what we used to be under the religious domain. Continuing with the meanings of this verse, but also understand that whichever individual among you turns away from this deen and his death takes place during a state of kufr, there will be those people whose deeds will be of no use to them in both the world and in the life of the hereafter. This is something we should take away from here and explain to others as well, that coming to this path is not a part-time job. We should convince ourselves that this is the path for us after rejecting the man-made system. Because without that, half-hearted attempts will not provide us that self-development which is required for the system of Deen, which is already established in the life of the hereafter. The fields of their efforts and deeds be reduced to cinders. This fact that at one point in time they were on the straight path of Deen will not be able to save them from this annihilation. This is not human law. This is Allah's law. This is the way He has decided to be. And this is from the domain of Amr into the domain of creation, that is Khalq. And this all is explained in the Quran from beginning to the end. Commonplace translation of this verse: they ask you concerning fighting in the prohibited month. Say, fighting therein is a grave offense, but graver is it in the sight of Allah to prevent access to the path of Allah, to deny Him, to prevent access to the sacred mosque and drive out its members. Tumult and oppression are worse than slaughter. Nor will this cease fighting you until they turn you back from your faith if they can. And that is why people who come to the Quran, that is the pure Quran, the people in the religious domain, their relatives and friends, etc., they wish them to come back to their fold because they feel very uncomfortable when these people tell them about the pure Quran, because deep down they don't like Allah of the Quran. And if any of you turn back from their faith and die in unbelief, their works will bear no fruit in this life, and in the hereafter they will be companions of the fire and will abide therein. Some comments on irtadad, which means to revert to the previous position after becoming a mu'min. This is, in general language, is called apostasy. In connection with war aims, conditions and instructions have been covered under these verses. It has been designated in these, which are the months of prohibition, and what was the state of fighting around Harme Kaaba during these months. Quran wanted us that certain months should be mutually agreed with everyone in the world, that we will not have fighting during these months. What it does is that people then sit down and think about these things, that what harm has been caused by mutual fighting, and they might resort to long-term peace. Because ultimately we need peace in the world so that people can make their own choices, as long as those are within some specified boundaries and laws. Other than this, two kinds of irtadad have been noted here. One irtadad is national, i.e. the whole nation becomes disgruntled with Deen, that is the divine system. And that is the status of Muslims of today. Whether it is under compulsion from the direction of an enemy or this nation abandons it voluntarily. So Muslims of today have abandoned it voluntarily. They talk about Islam, but they never follow the Islam of the pure Quran as a system. It has turned into a religion that is a personal affair. What will be its consequences? This has been discussed earlier under the topic of the change and succession of nations. Such a nation becomes deprived of the bounties of Allah, and it is visible across the world, more so in the Muslim world, that deprived, despite having the book of Allah, they are not the beneficiary of the book of Allah. In the other part of verse, that is 217, there is mention of individual irtadad, i.e. an individual adopts another religion after abandoning Islam. And of course, we all have a choice. We can always go back to our previous belief system. There has been a detailed discussion about this in previous pages. In the verse under view, it is also noted that if some individual does not come back to Islam again and dies in the state of Kufr, then all his deeds will go to waste, i.e., those deeds which he had done during the time he was following Islam. In the state of irtidad, he will also become deprived of the fruits of these. For a very good discussion on this, we should look into the book of apostasy in Islam by G.A. Pervez. A few more aspects. This is why the Quran has exhorted that do not die until you are in a state of Islam. For example, Quran says, وَلَا تُمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Because once you have made the commitment, this is what Quran says, accept it wholeheartedly, put in a lot of reflection and reasoning, and then based on evidence, accept it, and then make a commitment that you will never ever give up till you die. The description of this has been covered in the previous pages under verse 132. If the punishment for irtidad had been execution, then it would not have been stated that if any one of you turns back from his deen and dies in a state of kufr. It is our choice. Quran has very clearly said, La ikraha fi deen. There is absolutely no inner or outer compulsion in the matter of deen of Allah. The Quran wants man to use his potential of choice and intent without any external and internal compulsion. This is why it declares, La ikraha fi deen qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayyi wa man yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. There is no compulsion in the matter of deen. The paths of right and wrong are made clear. And it's very easy in a world of 2026 because the path of world of 2026 is wrong. Period. Whoever after rejecting Taghut accepts Eimaan in Allah, then Quran says, فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَاتِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Has grasped the most trustworthy handhold which will never break, and it is from that Allah who hears and knows all. So it is worth giving it a try till we are dead, and dead we are going to be. Simply, it makes no difference whether we are kafir or mu'min, we are going to die. And we know the lifestyle of those people who are not following this book. Then why not follow this book and take it to the end and see what happens? This means that the system in which man should live is not under the man-made laws where his choice and intent is heavily influenced. Being a possessor of the divine energy which gives him his eye, he should not be subjected to the will of another equal human being. And this is a point which we have gone through previously as well. We should keep it in mind when we are explaining it to others. You should live under the laws and values revealed in the Quran, in which true freedom is provided to man to make those choices at every crossroad of his life, and which will always lead to positive outcomes in this life, and his life becomes developed to that level where he acquires life in the hereafter for further evolution. That is, between the human psyche and that of Allah's psyche, there is absolutely no human being. It is a total freedom. And that freedom is enjoyed by knowing the laws of Allah as revealed in the Quran. Let us go to the last verse of today's presentation, 218. Becoming mu'mineen and then committing fully to striving in the path of Allah has its blessings. Inna allazina amanu wallazina hajaru wa jahadu fi sabilillahi ulaika yarjuna rahmatallahi wallahu ghafurun rahim. In opposition to them, those people who maintain conviction in the truth of this system and advance forward by breaking free from whatever is an impediment in the path of its establishment, so much so that even if they have to leave their homeland, they do so and keep striving continuously for its achievement, and until their final breath remain resolute on this very path. This is a very important point over here, that they leave their homeland if required. This point of decision does not reach in one day. Because they have acquired Eimaan, they have done solid deeds, they have worked together, they are heading towards this path of Allah called Sirat al-Mustaqim, and on this path, they are mentally prepared on this path that now a stage is likely to come where we might have to say goodbye to this piece of land of Allah's earth and move to another one. They are the very people who in the true sense can be hopeful of the rahmat of Allah, because this is where the growth of the self lies. This is where the system of Deen emerges. The law of Rububiyyat of Allah provides protection to them from the harmful effects of their minor errors of commission and omission, and provides the full means of nourishment for them. Commonplace translation of this verse is, those who believed and those who suffered exile and fought and strove and struggled in the path of Allah, they have the hope of the mercy of Allah, and Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. And this translation is not very accurate in terms of putting forward the true meanings of this verse. Next slide is hijrat, that is migration, the case of migration in the path of Allah. In this verse, those who migrate and do jihad in the path of Allah are mentioned. About jihad, a connection is mentioned in the previous pages to qital, that is the war. It is explained there that the life of a mu'min is to remain perpetually engaged in the establishment and strengthening of the system of Allah. In this striving, that stage finally arrives where one has to step into the battlefield for the defense of the system of Allah with every ounce of effort and resources. And we should also keep in mind that the root of hijrah, we should look at it, that it also means to leave something, to move away from something. And these people have already moved away from their previous belief system. They have given it up for a higher purpose of life. There is also another aspect to this striving, and that is that whatever is required to be given up for its sake, it is relinquished without any hesitation or reluctance. And obviously this hesitation and reluctance has to be removed, because when we come to the Quran, we come with all those fears and vulnerabilities and hesitations which we inherit more or less from the man-made system. So Quran helps us to recognize those in the first stage. This is termed as hijrat. Its culmination is when he must abandon his home, since like qital, there are completely misleading ideas created about hijrat also. It is considered essential that its meaning should be further clarified and elucidated. It is commonly averred that Rasulullah, that is the messenger, the last messenger, absconded to Medina from Mecca to save his life. Allah forbid. This is why it is named as escapism. It's not an escapism. This definition of hijrat is the consequence of these wrong notions. Escapism is where we go away from one point of a belief system and run away to another one to save our skin. Over here, people move from one to another for higher challenges of life. In reality, this is an important link in the program of the establishment of the system of Allah. This did not only happen in the life of Rasulullah, nearly every messenger had to go through this phase. Next slide, the role of the messenger highlighted. As has been noted earlier, the messenger's task is not merely to preach and give sermons, because that way we can never get any success on this path towards Deen. We can do it, keep doing it for all our life, and all Muslims can keep doing it for a million more years. Nothing will happen. Instead, it is to establish such a system of government in which the commands of Allah prevail. Sermons and advice, preaching and discussion, all are the means for the achievement of this purpose and are the paths which lead towards this destination. Because we have to go to the next stage then. Wherever he is born, he endeavors to ensure that the establishment of this system of government commences in that place. He commits maximum effort and energy to turn this environment into a favorable one for this system of life. He makes full endeavors in order that people can understand to what a life-giving system he is inviting them. But the rebellious forces who envisage the death of their own benefits and interests in the establishment of this system oppose it to the hilt. But when such a situation arises that there is no possibility of establishing this system at this location, then this proponent of the revolution is not content with simply saying to himself that the duty which was levied on me, I have fulfilled it. If these people now do not agree to it, Where is my fault in this? His aim is not only to pass on the message of haqq and truth to these people before him, he passes this message on to them for this reason, that they should establish a correct society in place of their wrong one. And for that, he is guided by the wahi of Allah. If he sees that the possibility of such a society is not feasible, then he does not remain sitting in the same place. He takes his companions to such a location in which the environment is suitable for the establishment of this society. Next slide is further reflections on Hijrat. Cultural boundaries and ethno-national lines do not hold any meaning for him. Therefore, its four walls can never be a hindrance on his path. For him, home is that piece of land which is conducive and amenable to the system of Allah. Hence, when he does not see any possibilities for the establishment of this system in one location, then he turns towards some such location where there are relatively greater potentials for this. The name for this is migrating towards Allah or going towards Allah in the words of the Messenger. The meaning of hijrat is to leave, to give up. Each and every moment of a Muslim's life is a reflection of hijrat. Because Quran nowhere says that you hold on to a piece of land just for your own convenience. You should all the time be thinking that which place, which land on the planet Earth is suitable for establishing this system. And obviously, to reach that conclusion, first we have to know that system. He abandons every one of those contacts which are preventing the achievement of his goal, keeps relinquishing willingly and unhesitatingly. These are the removing of thorns, which are tasks of great courage. Personal inclinations and desires, luxuries and conveniences, love for wealth, association with children, relationships with relatives, other passions and attractions, whichever thorn is present, this should be removed with one stroke. For an ease-loving and lazy person, the home possesses an irresistible allure. This is why man becomes deeply bound to the land of his home. This was the very attraction and magnetism of the home which became the cause for collectivism, unity and support among men living together at one location. And this is the reason for these nationalities in today's world. And after that, it gradually acquired such solidity that today the basis of nationalities in the world is declared to be nations. And this wide expanse of the earth of Allah, by becoming divided into pieces through the superficial demarcations of mountains and rivers, has turned into a den of wolves instead of being habitations of human beings. So all these borders are illegally drawn by human beings, and it was Mu'mineen which should have prevented it. Next slide is the Quran helps to set priorities right in life. There is no doubt in this that wherever man lives, its protection is essential. But just ponder over this, that the house which you construct with such enthusiasm and then protect your possessions and wealth, after finishing different tasks and engagements, your footsteps head in its direction unconsciously. I thought it is quite a good example noted in the book, so I put it down here. When you receive information that the river is flooded and very soon the torrent of flood water will be heading in the direction of your village where your house is located, how you then spurn every attraction and allurement of yours and immediately run away from it, because our own life is more important than our house and its possessions. At that time, neither love for your house nor its contents attracts your attention. Why do you do this? Because you possess another such entity which you consider dearer than your house and all its contents. For its protection, you abandon all things without any reluctance and hesitation. This invaluable entity, for the protection of which you do not care for any connection and association, is your life. There is no doubt in this that life is a very valuable entity, but those whose sight goes beyond the four walls of physical life, for them there is another thing which is more valuable and dearer than life as well, which is referred as the essence of the self, human eminence, kalma-i haq, or is referred to with the comprehensive term of Eimaan. Thus, if someone sees that the flood of batil is immense and which is coming from all directions, and in this his valuable entity is not secure, then could you say that the status of his home will have any residual importance for him? Without any hesitation or reluctance, he will throw away the thorny bush of the home from his path and will turn in a direction towards such a place where this invaluable entity of his becomes secure. Next slide, striving for the establishment of the divine system. And its protection is only possible through this system which is mentioned earlier, because it is a collective effort. It is not something like mysticism or just saying our namaz in our own house, sitting in one corner and doing some kind of a meditation. It has to be a collective system. And Quran is about the collective system. This is called hijrat. So much so that if life is to be laid down for its protection, then according to the principle that for the sake of a dearer possession, a less attractive entity is to be sacrificed, he will not hesitate to do this. Hence, hijrat is a demand of Eimaan and is the blueprint of the life of jihad of a moment. This is that reality on the basis of which the Quran has accorded so much importance to hijrat and has drawn attention to its fundamental rationale in various ways and through different methods. For example, in Surah Al-Ankabut, it is stated, O my servants who have Eimaan in the truth of my laws, come to grips with this reality that the purpose of your life is that you should only adopt obedience to me, that is, to the laws of Allah. If doing this is not possible in one part of the land, then my earth is very vast. And this is beautifully said, then my earth is very vast. You should migrate to such a part of the earth where there are better opportunities of living in this way. Just reflect on the part, follow my laws, i.e. the life of a moment is that he should adopt obedience to Allah and only to Allah. And that means first we should know what are his laws and what is the context of those laws in terms of human self-development and the system of Deen. If this is a possibility in that piece of land in which he is born, then great. And if it is not possible over there, then Allah's earth is very vast. Do not sit there with chained legs and become contented in obedience to non-Allah. This is not the life of a moment. And a question can come to our mind that in today's world, there is a humanity everywhere and there are nation states everywhere. That is not the issue. The Quran is saying that you should stop worrying about those things which are in a slightly distant future. Your job is to pick up my book, that is Allah's book, and start working on it. And the first stage, acquaint yourself with the finer aspects of this system of Deen, and then bring out all those latent potentials which are possibly can be brought out in the light of the divine attributes and the permanent values by staying together. And then you will see how things start falling in place in your favor with the passage of time. Finally, no differentiation among mu'mineen. I included this slide at the end a bit reluctantly because I was not sure whether it will be of any benefit. But then I thought that it should be of benefit because these two words of Ansar and Muhajir has appeared in the Quran. Only the excuse of those is accepted who are physically, not intellectually weak and feeble and cannot find the means to resort to hijrat. But those men, women, children who are so helpless and without means that they find no way to resort to hijrat. For example, in today's world, if visa is a problem or passport is a problem, obviously those mu'mineen cannot migrate till the time, or they do not have money to buy a ticket. Then hopefully Allah will, seeing their helpless state, forgive them, and He overlooks and provides the means of protection. I was not sure how to put this word over here, forgive. I was not very comfortable because Ghafur, we know, means protection. But we should keep that connotation in mind when we go through these verses. As far as those are concerned who do hijrat, and see whoever will do hijrat, leave his home and possessions, he will then find in Allah's earth numerous abodes, and he will find every kind of convenience over there. new means of sustenance will become available. And whoever will do hijrat from his home towards that place which is more suitable for the system of Allah, and then he suffered death, then his reward with Allah becomes established. And he will definitely find the reward for his striving. And Allah in every case is the provider of protection and nourishment. The Quran has introduced the mu'mineen of the earlier era in two categories, Muhajirin and Ansar. Muhajirin are those who after Hijrat came to Medina, that is from Mecca. And Ansar are those mu'mineen of Medina who provided residence to these Muhajirin and helped them in every way. As far as Mujahideen are concerned, both Muhajirin and Ansar are included in this because they were striving together. Among Muhajirin, one were those who had done Hijrat prior to the victory in Mecca, and the second were those who did Hijrat after this. The Quran has declared all of them to be Mu'mine Haqqa, that is, they were the true Mu'mineen who proved it that they are Mu'mineen through their word and deed. This should be understood at this point that Muhajirin and Ansar were not two separate parties. They were individuals of one and the same Ummah and were members of one Jamaat. So it was just to differentiate between the two for the sake of discussion in the Quran. But we should never ever differentiate between the two as it is done under the domain of religion. For them, these two terms were used because of their individual characteristics. This is the way the members of the Muslim Ummah, i.e. Muslimin, Mu'mineen, Muttaqeen, etc. have appeared in the Quran. Having the concept of separate parties in Ummah is against Islam and is shirk. With that, we come to the end of today's presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.